this is an evolutionary process. This is the 4th Capital Summit. How would you rate the agenda, the speaker sessions, longer, shorter, the content, the style of format and so on? What would you like to see done different, and all of that? So please, it really helps the ongoing evolve it. Okay. Helen needs to leave at 3:30. I am obedient, if nothing else, so I will arrange that. Okay. So maybe I'll start with Helen. Right, the final panel, and you've been a fantastic audience, and I've certainly learned so much today. The final panel is slightly different insofar as what we've had basically are different functions of raising capital: seed, angel, growing, startup, end, IPO, all that, growth capital and so on. And then we've heard war stories from entrepreneurs. What we have now is a very interesting group of people who cover all of the above insofar as Helen Cahill is CEO, Helen, nice to see you, CEO of InvoiceFair, which is an award-winning new business startup. So she is both an entrepreneur and she is an investment vehicle through InvoiceFair. One of the partners of the entire event is the organisation Scale Ireland. You'll have seen their stand here, and Martina will be very familiar to you, those who are interested in politics. And Scale Ireland has in its membership 2,200 indigenous organisations employing 55,000 people, and it not only is representative, it's advocacy, but it observes a lot of things in terms of, you know, what we can do to help with red tape and so on, and is a very active voice for this community, but also in turn can have many insights into maybe in terms of the issue of raising capital and so on. Emma Buckley is not here. Mike McGrath is Kwayga, who is a fascinating company. And if I was a maker of food and beverage, I would want to speak to this man because they do the data banks, and it's all paid for by the huge grocery retail stores, the big chains. He's the guy who will get you in the front door and has great data systems for all of that. And last but not least is Axonista. And Claire McHugh is the founder of CEO of that. So maybe I'm going to start with you. Just tell us what it says in the tin about Axonista.
So really we're in the video commerce business. And what that means is that we make videos shoppable for e-commerce brands so that they can increase their sales online. And what that looks like as a consumer experience is that somebody can watch a live video show and they can chat directly with the seller in that show, and they can purchase product instantly while they're watching it. So that's the thing that we enable. It's the live stream shopping market, or the video commerce market, is enormous in China. It's worth 500 billion at the moment. It's experienced a huge volume of growth. There's an expectation for the US market to follow a similar route. That's at a much earlier stage. It's worth about 20 billion at the moment, but it's growing year on year about 83%. We're very privileged to have one of the leading companies in that market as one of our key customers, and that's QVC and Home Shopping Network.
But that's only half the story. You've been travelling on planes to the States and selling your stuff from very humble origins. Tell us a bit about your growth story.
About the growth story, well, I just got back from the States about 2 weeks ago, so I've been definitely I think I was on about 8 planes in 2 weeks. So that was getting back into the swing of things there. Our company size is about 50 people, which we've grown a lot over the last 2 years. Some of that is a little bit from the COVID bounce of everyone going online, and obviously technology's taken a 10-year leap in about 2 years. So now, we're a remote first company. We're based all around Ireland, but also we have a small team in Croatia and in Spain as well, where we're growing centres of excellence in different principles. We're continuing to scale. We want to own the US video commerce market.
Okay, video commerce, really, really exciting story. Helen, I understand your time constraint. InvoiceFair. Tell us that particular story. It's a fintech company. A very exciting story again. Tell the story.
Thanks, Ivan. Hello, everybody. This is the graveyard shift, so I'll keep it brief. As Ivan said, InvoiceFair is a fintech. It's an alternative funder, predominantly in the working capital space. So what we do is we provide growth funding to companies that are scaling. Or in more simple terms, we give people money to spend on inventory or raw material or labor or marketing or sales, all on the strength of their receivables, or AKA their customers, the business that they win. And we've been around since 2015. We've provided over 1.3 billion of funding to SMEs, mainly in Ireland and the UK. I'm one of Tom Early and Enterprise Ireland's female HPSUs. We raised equity ourselves, and EI matched our own funding. And we are sector agnostic. So if you think about, again, Tom referred to Ireland being an export-driven economy, an open economy, which is full of really ambitious companies that are selling goods or services to large multinationals. And those large multinationals, as we all know, have been stretching out their credit terms to the smaller guys. So that presents every financial director with a challenge in terms of scaling and managing that cash flow and accelerating their working capital. And then we have a whole new breed of companies where their business model is subscription-based. They're SaaS, or they have reoccurring revenue. Again, their assets are their customers. And there's very little choice really in Ireland in terms of tapping into growth, non-dilutive capital for working capital reasons. So to put it in context, if you think about, I'm casting my mind back to the beginning in 2015, we would have funded the companies that had the machinery that built the Lewis, that did all the paving on the Lewis, the archaeological consultancy company that stood shoulder to shoulder with the civil engineers. We funded all of that. We funded a lot of the renewable wind farms across Ireland. If you go outside and see an electric bike or an electric scooter, it's very likely that we have funded that. Again, a subscription-based model. So we are sector agnostic. And I suppose the value proposition that we have over and above the alternatives in the working capital space is that we fund at every stage of the trading cycle. So a lot of alternatives and banks will provide funding to companies when the work is done or the goods have been delivered. We see the customer problem as being prevalent at a much earlier stage, and that's where growth funding is essential.
So provision of working capital
growth
in three
funding.
words. Okay. How long is the term, the maximum term? So if an invoice is payable in 90 days, cash receivable, would you do it for 90 days or do you do it for longer?
So funding a receivable or funding an invoice is only one element of what we do, but we would generally fund out to 120 days or longer. Unlike, I suppose...
What's your max?
Our max, we don't have a max. We're not rigid. It's really around the quality of the receivables. Because it's the receivables that they are going to be able to unlock funding from. So if that covenant is strong, think about it.
But there must be a time limit. If someone hasn't paid their bill...
That's when it comes to a very defined product like an invoice, and the invoice has defined credit terms. So our average duration for that product in the platform would actually be about 65 days. But we will go out to 120 days for MNCs that are stretching out in the retail and tech sector. A lot of them are.
Would you ever fund something that had a hope element in it?
No.
No. Right, there's no hope.
No,
right,
under the hood...
it's wrong to give hope where there is no hope.
I mean, under the hood, we're in the, notwithstanding the flexibility and speed of what we do, we're in the underwriting game, and it's key that we get the money that we advance back safely. Our funding mix is made up of institutional funders, I should say that, and they are interested in buying receivables as an investment asset class.
No, it's a vital cash flow tool, and it sounds fantastic, and with 1.3 billion, it's very popular. Mike, Kwayga, I didn't do it justice there, explain it.
Thanks, Ivan. Kwayga is a supplier sourcing platform, particularly in the food and drink sector in Europe. So we work with many wholesalers, importers, supermarkets who are looking to discover new supply chain partners. And that is obviously very topical at the moment with the supply chain difficulties. Some suppliers are at capacity, others are having raw ingredients issues, costs are increases, consumer demands are changing. So there's an ongoing need for wholesalers and supermarkets to have relevant and appropriate suppliers. And we do that through smart technology. We crawl and trawl the internet and trade directories and events, looking for food producers, looking for producers that can create and develop a new product for the supermarket, or looking for, particularly at the moment, there's a surge in own label and private label brands to the detriment of premium brands. But that again is a change in consumer demands and the pressures that we live in. So that's what we're focused upon. It's really about that supplier discovery piece, focused on the European
Put
food
some
and drink
numbers
sectors.
on it.
We would have over 71,000 producers on our network who are categorized by location, by size, by product, by their capacity and capability at the moment. So we have one of the largest food and drinks databases in Europe, and that's something that we're growing actively every day. That's a real asset in the business. Protecting that and make it available to supermarket buyers is where the real value is. In terms of numbers as well, we're working with all the supermarkets in Ireland, 5 or 6 in the UK and a number in Spain already. And that's after launching 18 months ago.
How do you fund Kwayga?
Kwayga was self-funded originally, and we've done a pre-seed and a partial pre-seed earlier in the year, and we're actually closing out a second part of the pre-seed at the moment. So it's angel investors and Enterprise Ireland.
No, I meant your revenue.
Oh, my apologies. The business model, it's a subscription model. So it's free to join for buyers and suppliers. Suppliers would pay a subscription to be verified on the platform, and we have an enterprise solution for our larger supermarkets. Depending on the number of deals, the number of people in the team, etc., it's an enterprise monthly subscription.
But if you have 70,000 suppliers, how do you know the ones that are brilliant and the ones that are crap?
That's where the due diligence comes in, and that's where we're assessing.
Well, do you do an evaluation?
We do, yeah. We do it ourselves. We do use third-party tools on assessing the business, looking at the risk profile, similar to InvoiceFair. We get samples of products in the office, which helps. And there's a number of other tools that we use. But obviously, we have. It's not that we're recommending a particular producer over any other. We're verifying their credentials, that they are who they say they are. They have the capacity, capability, and the supermarkets will all also do their own onboarding and negotiation as well.
Where are you based?
Cork-based.
Right. Okay. I won't hold that against you. Martina. Because I want to pivot on to the issues and the growing pains and some of the challenges that are out there. Scale Ireland. What's the difference between that and kind of all the trade associations? You know, within IBEC, there are 35 different subgroups from confectioners to, you know, whatever. And then you have your ISMEs and all of these. Define the USP of Scale Ireland and, you know, the 2,200 members.
Well, first of all, Scale Ireland was only set up in late 2019, and one of the reasons was to directly represent Irish tech startups and scaling companies. So it is in that lane and that lane alone, and we're specifically representing everyone from a student entrepreneur to a founder, and that could be a person working away, coming up with their innovative idea in their attic or in their spare room, where John Purdy began his unbelievable journey with Ergo, or to scaling companies, and we represent some of the tech unicorns here as well.
Does it include life sciences?
It includes the full gambit of tech startups and scaling companies. We have everyone from ag tech, clean tech, enterprise solutions, fintech, every sector within that has a tech-based solution. And I think that's what separates us out. And also, many of our key partners are involved in this sector. They're VCs, they're bigger tech companies, or they're people that are selling to our members.
So I want to be a unicorn or a decacorn, and I join Scale Ireland. What can you do to help me?
Well, first of all, we're a community-based organisation, so you can join us and pay the join-up fee, the membership fee. And by the way, if you're a student entrepreneur or if you're pre-VAT reg, it's free because we want them in the community. And we have one of our key working groups is a student group, and we're working with Enterprise Ireland on making sure more students think of entrepreneurship. and also know all the advantages as well as the risks involved. So that's very important. So one of the key elements of this is networking. It could be in our Slack channel of 980 people, where every day people like Gavin are moderating the talent sub-channel, or it could be help, advice, announcements, or people asking basic questions about tools or funding or whatever it is. We also hold key webinars, holding one with Stripe and 2 leading founders, one of whom is here today, on succeeding in challenging times. We held one with 2 leading tax experts, which was very enjoyable, I have to say, and probably the only thing tax advice you'll get free in a long time. And we also host Ask Me Anythings on our Slack channel. That's the community element. We also have our working groups, and all the time behind the scenes, there's introductions and there's networking. We hold very high-level events. The last one was with the Minister for Finance, but we also had Wayflyer, Shorla, Oncology and Squid, and we had 2 leading investors and 150 people packed, first come, first, got the seats in our in the Avalon offices, very plush offices, who've been key supportive of ours.
So in terms of...
That's the community.
Okay.
I'm not
the
finished.
Representation and advocacy, yeah.
I know, I'm only starting. And we also were organising our Regional Startup Summit. Last year it was in Cork, launched by the Taoiseach. This next year, early next year, it will be in Galway, and we had leading, we had Finergo, a tech unicorn, we had Teamwork, we had a university panel, impactful panel, and key leading stakeholders in that to help people in terms of the potential and also the challenges facing them. And we'll recently launch our next State of Startup survey. We also do research. We also do proposals, extensive amount of proposals and research on key issues affecting founders, and the full gamut from that early stage right up to the scaling companies.
So lobbying is not something you do?
It is advocacy.
Oh, right.
We're like the National Women's Council or the Irish Farmers Association or whatever representative organisation. That's exactly what we are.
Okay, so if I'm going to an LEO to fill up a form, or going to Tom, for Enterprise Ireland, would you provide direct assistance, advisory?
No, and I think that's a full-time role for financial advisory services, to be fair enough. And I don't think, any representative role or body would get involved in that directly. But what we do is give people advice on where they can go to, and they can ask questions in our Slack channel.
Okay, so the theme here is meeting the challenges of growing your business. If you have to go, Helen, maybe we go to you first on this. So look, this is in the eye of the beholder, like beauty, insofar as that you just tell me what are the growing challenges that you face.
Well, obviously we're a fintech, so we've had challenges in terms of getting talent on the tech side, given the climate earlier this year. As a result, when we were hiring 10 people, they ended up in 9 different countries, which does a lot for your diversity and inclusion, but actually logistically isn't very, it's much more challenging to try and do that. I think that, albeit that it hasn't been a challenge for us necessarily, I think, and I would say this, but I think that getting fit for purpose funding, funding that mirrors the ambition and the strategy of where a company wants to go, is a huge challenge. And I think that companies, and I would say this, need to start changing their mindset and thinking of their customers and the business that they win with their customers as a mechanism for unlocking funding, because there's models out there like InvoiceFair that can do that, have a legal mechanism and have the requisite funding to convert your hard-earned shoe leather and digital efforts, etc., into funding. So if you think about winning a contract, if you think about selling your platform, if you think about your membership, it's all assets that you own, you control. And I guess it's about companies thinking big and understanding that in the financial services landscape of today, and Denise was saying about technology, the way it's galloping ahead, there's ways in which you can liquefy those customers and those assets into upfront growth capital.
And for doing that, how much do you charge?
Barely anything.
So of the 1.3 billion, you just
money
in, money out?
So our pricing is straightforward but unique in that it's dynamic. So for those of you in the credit space, it's price to risk. So I think that's very fair. We don't have a one-size-fits-all. So our revenue model and how we make money ourselves is that we charge a platform fee for the customers that want to fund through the platform. And unlike, I think, Spark, we actually charge the funder a percentage of their investment gain because they're purchasing receivables and generating an investment gain. So to point out again that we fund at every stage of the working capital cycle. If any of you out there had won a very large order and you needed working capital to buy raw material or to hire coders or whatever, funding that is higher risk than you wanting to fund €1 million invoice to the same MNC for work that had been done. So clearly the cost of finance, to put it simply, is higher when it comes to funding earlier. But funding earlier can change the game because if your limiting factor is access to funding and you can get it on the strength of the covenant of your customer, then
well, that sounds reasonable.
It's, you know, you can.
But would you care to put figures on that spectrum?
So the range of funding would go from 5% to maybe, say for example, in 2020 we funded maybe 80 million of PPE because that was a real problem. Irish companies getting huge orders to NHS, HSE. That funding was double that. Why? Because there's performance risk, you know, there's even though we do all our diligence, etc., that given that the institutional market buy risk, that risk it's riskier and it's more expensive, but it's very enabling. So not to dodge the question, but we're not like some other providers where they can say, oh, we charge this for interest rate. Therein lies the opportunity, I think, that you can actually craft a solution.
So is it negotiable?
It is not that it's negotiable. It reflects the cost of and the risk profile of what you're doing. Yeah. So the way we look at our pricing is what is the impact on your margin? So what does the economics of this stack up for you in terms of getting this finance? And we would feel very responsible that it does stack up, but we'll actually set that out in a model for them. So that is our approach. We talk more about impact on margin as opposed to an interest rate because, quite frankly, an interest rate, an awful lot of financial controllers and financial directors are misguided around the true cost of finance because it's not just the interest rate. There's about 20 other components that if you dump them all in a bucket, you know, and talked about margin erosion and the true cost of finance, very different. So we tend to approach it differently and we price it to risk.
Okay. Claire, Axonista's challenges in growth.
Okay. I think when you look at challenges in growth, there's three things. There's strategy. You have to have a good strategy. You have to be looking to overcome the challenges that you have, and everyone needs to know what that is. There's people. There's a whole range of people challenges, and there's finance, and they're the three categories of things. Just to say, I'm also on the board of Scale Ireland. I think they're a wonderful community and something that we've needed for a while.
What have you got out of Scale Ireland?
I think it's about the support and the advocacy for Indigenous Irish tech companies that didn't really have a voice before. Mm-hmm. We've created a wonderful ecosystem here through the work of the IDA, which has a lot of these amazing companies with their headquarters.
Spin-offs
and
yeah.
All of this stuff. But and as a result of that, we have all these talented people. And you know, these are resources that Irish Indigenous tech companies can really use, and I think we could talk about that a little bit because I think that's very powerful. You know, using that to our strengths and creating new career growth paths for them that maybe weren't available to them in the bigger tech companies.
For example,
at the moment, because we're scaling our company, I'm bringing in people to replace me out of the jobs I shouldn't be doing anymore, and they're senior leaders, and they've been, you know, that we've. People that have a few people that joined us recently from Intercom, but another VC-funded companies like that, and they come with a discipline, a process, operational excellence, and all this expertise that they can bring to us, and we can offer them, and not just us, but other Irish companies as well that are scaling can offer them career paths that weren't available to them. You know, if you have COO in your mindset and your sights, you could do that at an Irish tech company and get to there faster than you could ever do when the company's headquartered in Silicon Valley.
Okay, so that's staff. Talk to me about finance.
Finance is another one. You know, so like we've bootstrapped largely, but we've been hugely supported.
What does bootstrap mean?
Means that you use your own resources to fund the business.
Okay.
So we started off as a services company our first few years. We were a little bit early to market with interactive video. I worked in Setanta Sports. That's where I came from, the media industry, and I could just see how it was changing and how the way that people were consuming content would continue to change over the coming years. You know, the first thing was like, what does the market need? We had needed to figure that out, so we started with the services first strategy, and we've been on a growth path to a product first strategy. So when we found out what the media companies needed and the commonalities between them, we created an interactive video platform, and then we further focused that on the video commerce opportunity, which we know a lot about because we worked with QVC now for about 8 years. And you know, the finance piece, we've been hugely supported by Enterprise Ireland the whole way through, you know, from us being a very, very early stage startup and on the HPSU to today. They've been an incredibly important partner. We've been very...
and someone was asking earlier that you had to be export. If you weren't doing all this stuff in
Day
Eastern
one.
Europe and America,
Yeah.
if you didn't have that mindset, that door would have been closed to you.
When you're selling to media companies, there's only like a few of them here.
Yeah, that's right.
So you have to think outside of the
But you have to
country from
start
day
somewhere, someone who speaks the same language. And like to
Absolutely.
fly to New York is costly and you don't know anyone there maybe, and it's hard.
Yeah, you have to develop that network. But I kind of had the seeds of that network from my time at Setanta because we had channels in lots of different places. You know, we broadcast way more outside of Ireland and Europe.
And as you grow further, would you be looking to VCs and ultimately
Yes.
exit, or would you be looking to venture debt, or all the things we've heard today?
I think we also had H2020 funding. So our kind of seed round, which was like 1.7 million, was from the European Union. So that was a couple of years ago.
That was a gift, was it?
Yeah.
It was a grant.
It is a grant, yeah. I wouldn't say like a gift, like they didn't wrap it up in a bow and say, here you are. I had to
well,
work
you
very
don't
hard
have to give
get
it back. That's the main thing.
No, you don't have to give it back, but you do have to do a
That's
lot of
what I
work
meant by
for
gift,
it.
yeah.
So, you know, that was really, really helpful. And I think the market
How did
that
that
we're
come
going
on
after,
your horizon? How did you access that? Did someone ring you up and say you should apply for this, or what?
I do know. Somebody I knew had applied for it and got it and thought it was a good next
Because
step.
it's amazing the amount of times it's come up, and for fairly chunky money too.
Yeah, it's chunky money.
Yeah.
And the European grant, it's one of the options that you can take. And I think, you know, it doesn't depend on the markets.
Because then you can co-fund, you know, that.
Yeah, you can.
So what does the future look like for Axonista?
Well, we're 50 people today. We're growing. We grew 83% from 20 to 21% in terms of our revenue, and I think 63% the year before. So we're really taking that, like, a product strategy is really starting to kick in. The market that we're going after is still very, very early, and we're trying to prove out some things before we can go to a VC and go, here, put money in here, it'll spit out money here, because that's kind of what you need to do. And we're testing some things now on that, but like I think that's probably the logical next step for us. But I think something like Helen's business is really, really great as another piece to that pie. And you know, businesses should look at a number of different funding solutions.
And a lot of them have been evidenced here today.
Yes.
Mike, your challenges. Staff, finance.
Exactly, yeah, that's it in a nutshell. The disadvantage, we've been asked the same question last. It is staffing, I suppose, number one, getting the key people in. Like we're a very small team, we've 9 people. But having 9 people that are the right 9 people around the table is very important. And doubling that in the next 12 months is the plan too. So recruiting and getting the right people around the table, right jobs, focusing on the strategy. And thankfully, over the last matter of weeks or maybe a couple of months, it has the recruiting market has softened slightly in terms of the talent. We're looking from a technology point of view and digital sales. So we're having good conversations at the moment to bring people in the new year. So that's the first thing. In finance, while Well, yeah, it just takes the time. I suppose it takes time away from the business is what I feel, and my background isn't finance, is sourcing and procurement. It takes time to go through the process, but obviously it is a process. The due diligence has to be done. Finding the right partner, that the partners, be it Angels or LVC for us, and Enterprise Ireland, obviously that share the vision and where we're going, is the key point. So it's just the time that it takes. There's no particular issue around that.
But is the method of finance mostly VC? Like, are you diluting your stake as you go forward?
Yeah, we are looking at venture, and we haven't diluted as of yet. We're using.
Well, what about conventional banking?
Convertible loan note. Until we generate significant revenues, I don't think we're an option for banking,
Okay.
and that's just effectively where we're at from a risk point of view, and we understand that. But again, one of the benefits of Ireland is there has been good exits the last number of years. There's some very successful entrepreneurs in the country and in the room who understand where we're at and see where we're going. So having that financial input, but also strategic advice, opening doors, getting people that are in relevant sectors helps as well.
So, and if you need to go, Helen, that's fine. These are individual stories and growing pains. You're looking at the collective. So, thank you. What are the lowest common denominators? You know, in other words, the question's on steroids, really. In other words, that, you know what I mean, you're hearing lots of, you know, it could be that the technology isn't great, that the entrepreneur doesn't tick all the boxes that people are, but the generality of what the headwinds are.
Okay, so in terms of a little bit off at the moment.
Keep talking.
Okay, so we have an evidence-based approach, and last year we launched our State of Startup survey, and we'll be launching our 2023 one, obviously in early 2023. But the issues that were identified by our members, and 230 CEO/founders replied, so I had to be the leader of the leadership of the company, and they identified, not surprisingly, finance as the key issue heading into 2022. They also identified the retention and recruitment of staff, and that was our lead issue and dominated every meeting we had with key stakeholders, and Claire was at some of them with Leo Clancy. And founders really outlining the difficulties they were getting to employ and to keep their staff, because they can't compete with big companies or other companies.
What do you think are the solutions to that? Because, like, I do a lot of work with the hotel industry. 19,000 people were immigrants after COVID. They went home. They haven't returned. The building industry, like recruiting in a situation where the live register is 4.4% is different to 15%. There aren't buckets of people out there. Is it the education system is not providing the tech people? We've heard of the STEM situation for females. What do you think is the solution to those problems?
Well, there's specific dynamics to this sector, because Claire's company and Mike's company will be competing with bigger companies who can offer bigger pay packages and remuneration. And also they're competing with companies in other jurisdictions with more favourable terms and conditions, because this is a mobile workforce. So what we looked at the Keep Share Option scheme, which is directed at startups, and we looked at why it wasn't working, and one of the reasons was very difficult to navigate for anyone. There's been hardly any take-up of it, and also it was linked to salary. So that was a problem.
Sorry, what is the Keep Share scheme?
The Keep Share Option scheme is basically a share option scheme that would facilitate, for instance, someone hiring to get shares in a company.
ESOP, yeah.
And well, it's a state-run one, and there's incentives for having the Keep Share Option scheme. So we looked at the various terms and conditions of that, what was working, what was not, and what would increase take-up, because that's another way for Mike or Claire to keep staff or to attract staff and to keep them here. And whether they're competing against a bigger company, and we know the landscape has changed now, or against another jurisdiction.
And these were tax incentives?
It is. There are certain incentives within that.
I interrupted you. That was staff. Go on.
Okay, and in relation to, obviously, financing, I should say, obviously the government's 90 million fund with the European Investment Bank, with Enterprise Ireland, and the Irish Strategic Investment Fund is coming on board. It should be deployed, hopefully, soon, and that's a 90 million fund directed at early stage startups. And we have also worked with Enterprise Ireland on looking at their Competitive Start Fund, and that was where an early stage startup could have got 50,000, but they would have had to give over 10% equity. And I think all of our members And that came up with our key meeting with our members. That was seen as a high price. Good when it was originated, but not now. And we're delighted to say, following engagement with Enterprise Ireland, that's changed to a convertible loan note that's much more favourable conditions and of its time. The other issue, no surprise, last year was cost of doing business. Let's all admit that that's going to be a very prominent issue next year and is now. And also the administrative burden on startups and scaling companies. No one can afford or have the time and resources for lots of advisors that you were mentioning quite a lot earlier, and that's a key issue for them. So, for instance, one of the key schemes that, incentives and targeted government supports for government, the guidance from revenue runs to 101 pages, and I actually was corrected recently by our tax experts who say that's actually increased to 117 or 107 pages. So that was a key issue, and it really frustrates startups because many people, there are all these great targeted supports from the government, and that they've worked hard, their officials have worked hard, revenue have worked hard, and we've worked hard saying these will help. But if you have to spend so much time and energy and money navigating them and neglecting growing your market, well, then that's an issue.
I don't know if you were here for Raymond earlier, the IP expert, and all of that. I would have thought you could have, within Scale Ireland, real student geniuses. They're just going to reinvent the world. How do they get legal protection? And it strikes me that they need some form of legal protection. What's the story there?
Well, first of all, we have a student working group, and they raise issues that are important to them. They have identified, and they're from Cork, Limerick, Galway, the universities in Dublin and third level institutions, and they have raised actually that they find it difficult to get internships and paid internships within startups, and they also they want to experience startups because that will, and to gain that experience, to put that on their CVs, because we all know the jobs fairs that go around, it's mostly geared towards big companies, so we need a structured approach to it. But in terms of those students, every day in our Slack channel, people are swapping advice and help on what to do and how to do it, because those problems aren't new. If you look at some of the members of our steering group, some of the great leaders from across the country, including Claire and Peter Coppinger, they all started when they were in college. So all the issues that they're facing, and this is the benefit of being part of a community, that they share that advice, and guess what? For free.
Okay. How do you join Scale Ireland?
You can go to the website and the member page, and if you're a student, by the way, it's free, and it's based on size. It was designed by startups, so it is very cost efficient, is all I would say, and we deliberately did that, and we've actually increased our membership because of that this year.
Okay, I'm going to finish where I finished with everyone else. Is there anything from your own journey, RTE, politics and so on, or from Scale Ireland, or from Axonista, or your own company, Mike, that you'd like to impart to this audience? And it can be random, anything you want to say. Go, Mike.
Again, on the topic of fundraising, it's something that it's a new world to me in one sense. But for those that are fundraising, it takes a lot of time. So it's very important, I think, to do the right due diligence at first, making sure that the investors and VCs are actually active. A lot of people will drink a lot of coffee and take up your time, but as a founder, you really have to focus on your customers. So for me, that's something that I remind myself on a weekly basis to make sure we're doing the right thing for our business.
Claire?
I would say, don't be afraid to say you don't know the answer to a question.
I do that all the time.
Because I think you might learn something. And
yes.
I think there is, especially if you're a founder, you're trying to put out there this hugely positive expression of your business, which you do need to do, but put your hands up and say, actually, I don't know the answer to that question. You might learn something.
I use it's above my pay grade, or that's work in progress, and it actually is a way to develop an emotional relationship, that you're not the smartest Alec in the room. I think that's great advice. So sort of humanity.
Yes.
Yeah.
I suppose wider that first of all, those networking opportunities, those introductions are really key, particularly in this sector. And sometimes you may say they're a waste of time, but I can't tell how many new partners and members we've had for simply meeting people and opening doors to others. That's really important. And also, the personal one, people take their cue from you. If you don't believe in you, no one else will.
If you don't believe in you, no one else will. That is going to be the last word on this conference. Please stay seated just for a moment, because with that, I want to wrap it up. I would ask you, please, to go to the feedback delegate form just in relation to ongoing. Now, every attendee will get a list of the data on post-event on the presentations, and also you will all get the attendee list, which will give you a further opportunity to network. I'd like to thank all the iQuest team, Cahill and everyone else for putting it together. I'd like to thank our people in Croke Park, but most especially, today would not have happened without our sponsors, Goodbody, Euronext, Martinson Mayor, and all our exhibitors, EIIS Management, Simple Scaling and Spark Crowdfunding, and all our partners, Scale Ireland, InvoiceFair, Health Tech Ireland and ISME. I hope you've been a fantastic audience, especially those who've stuck it out until the end. I hope you found it as informative and as interesting as I did. And with that, I'd like to formally close the 2022 Raising Capital Summit. Until the next time, thank you all, and thank you to our audience. All right. Thank you. And thank you particularly for your insights.